Welcome everyone to our 64th live stream in the Space Shooter DevVenture. So there's been quite a long gap between episode 63 and this one, and I've been taking a little bit of a break now at the start of the year, and I hope to get back to the live streams more consistently now that things have calmed down a little at the start of the year. And as such, I kind of forgot where we were at the end of 63. But looking now at Perplexity, which is why I like to use Perplexity and have an AI assist me with my project management. It helps me to keep track of all the things that I was doing. And so at a glance, I can kind of tell, more or less where we were, where we left off, what we need to do. And if I don't actually remember, I could just ask. I could ask Perplexity, please remind me, where were we? What was the last thing we were doing? What was the next thing we planned to do? And now I can go back to what we were doing, right? So in our project, in testing seek behavior, remember we had set up all the waypoints in a box, a cube surrounding the pirate enemy. And what we wanted to do is examine how the pirate enemy would manage that triage. So if you recall, there was a triage, right? Step 1, step 2, step 3. And if you don't recall, it's this. Case 1 is boxed in, case 2 is cluster avoidance, case 3 is walled in, all right? But there was a triage. I don't seem to find that triage anymore. Not here anyway. But what I can do is find it here, right? Just gonna scroll up here. You know what? It would be easier just to ask Perplexity to give us the list of the triage, right? Please remind me of the triage we designed for the AI actors. And how they avoid colliding with avoidance objects. Yeah, so we set up a 3-stage triage ladder around a standard flee avoidance loop, plus a separation between logic and global failure. Not logic. You can see I'm a bit rusty, eh? So you set up a 3-stage triage ladder around a standard flee avoidance loop, plus a separation between local and global failure. So AI actors don't get stuck grinding against avoidance objects. The core flee and avoidance behavior is that each ship has a danger sensor. That's this thing over here. You can see it, the capsule surrounding the enemy ship over there, right? So they have that, a danger sensor, which is Area 3D, that detects nearby avoidance objects, and a behavior flee, right, that computes a flee direction from danger, which is called flee direction is the normalized difference between the ship position and the danger position. Subtract danger from current and then normalize it, and that's your flee direction. Okay, and then once it does that, it then tries to reach a safety radius from that danger, and that is of course capped by a maximum flee duration and a maximum flee distance. Right, so this is obviously meant to prevent the enemy AI from infinite flee, perpetual flee, where if you're stuck in a situation like this, for example, you're not just going to bounce around inside the box forever. And if you're stuck in other circumstances like this one or this one, you will, eventually you'll time out. So you hit the flee, you start fleeing, you hit here, you flee again, you hit here, you flee again. Eventually the global timer is going to kick in and say, okay, hang on. You're in perpetual flee mode, and we need to figure something else out, right? And that would either be reduce the size of the avoidance object, or not the avoidance object, but the area, right? The collision avoidance area. Or you could just stop moving, or you could find another angle, a different angle, that would actually take you further away, like directly out of danger, and then do that. So coming back to perplexity, right? So that's the behavior flee. Now the NPC behavior manager temporarily overrides that current pattern with a flee whenever a danger sensor fires, right? So if the enemy ship is doing a particular behavior, whatever that behavior might be, right? Patrol, or attack, or seeking a specific location or target, and it happens to encounter an avoidance object in its path, then it will automatically interrupt. So that's this temporary override that you see here, right? It will override that behavior temporarily, as in pause, and then resume later, right? And then it does a flee. So it avoids the thing, whatever that thing is, avoidance object, something that can't be destroyed. It has to be avoided, right? Because you've got the 4 types of responses to danger, right? Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And in our context, fawn doesn't really make sense. But here, 3, right? So fight, flight, or freeze. And if you can't fight the object, as in shoot it, or drill into it, or throw some kind of missile, like launch a missile at it, or whatever, if it cannot be destroyed by any means that you as an AI actor possesses, then avoid it, right? So flight, as in flee. And so that's what happens, right? It comes to a point where I can't go through this thing, I can't attack this thing, I have to avoid this thing, and so I avoid it. And then once I've avoided it and I know that I'm safe from it, now I can resume that behavior that I was doing, whatever it is, right? So that's what this is here. And then it restores the interrupted pattern when the flee is complete, right? So the normal cycle is danger sensor hits, then flee overrides, and either safe distance is reached or it's timed out and the pattern is resumed. Okay, now the local versus a global failure is such that a local failure is only if the behavior flee hits a maximum flee duration or a flee distance without reaching the safety radius. Then it reports status failed, and the reason is the flee timeout, right? Now the manager treats this as this attempt did not succeed, but it does not change the global behavior yet. It simply restores or restarts the pattern. Okay, and the global failure is different. How is it different? Let's find out. I don't remember, so that's why I'm reading through all of this, right? The manager tracks total time spent in override within some window. And if that accumulated override exceeds a max override duration or max override distance, then you treat that as a global stuck state. So flee is not just failing once, the system is failing to resolve danger in this region completely at all, right? And the triage ladder is applied only when this global budget is exceeded and not on a single failed flee, right? So the ladder has 3 levels. Triage level 1 is reduce the safety radius. Okay, so once the global override budget is exceeded, you step through triage levels, and the first one is to reduce the safety radius, right? The current safety buffer is unrealistic in this cluster. Accept a smaller comfort zone. right? The action, reduce the buffer, the behavior flee.safety radius, and scale by a factor or clamp to a lower bound. You could optionally tweak the flee speed, right? Or you could restart flee from the current position with the reduced radius. And the goal here is to allow the ship to escape through a dense cluster by being less picky about how far from obstacles they need to get. In other words, be more risky, right? Take a bigger risk, go closer to the avoidance object. And triage level 2, emergency safety radius. Interpretation, even reduced safety radius didn't work. Therefore, go into emergency evasive mode. Drop the safety radius further to an emergency radius that is almost just clear of collision. And possibly bias the flee direction more aggressively away from cluster centroids, or from the cluster centroid, instead of individual obstacles, right? So prioritize getting out of the meat grinder, in quotes, over maintaining tactical spacing. And then triage level 3 is to surrender, arrival at centroid. Excuse me. Escape failed multiple attempts and stop trying to flee, right? Just give up. Go to a stable point somewhere in the middle of that cluster and just wait. Switch from flee to an arrival behavior targeting a safe centroid, computed from the avoidance objects or from a higher level safe point. The arrival slows and parks the ship in a chosen safe spot instead of endlessly dodging. And the goal here is to guarantee convergence and prevent infinite oscillation in unsolvable geometries. After each triage assessment, the manager restarts flee and continues to track override time, climbing the ladder if conditions remain bad. And how does this prevent collision grinding? The danger sensor fires when an avoidance object is within a defined detection radius. Does not apply physics forces. Instead, it triggers flee overrides and logs which object is dangerous. Behavior flee uses the avoidance distance and direction to steer away before physical collision and stops trying once the ship is outside the safety radius rather than running forever. So this is all just a summary, right? The triage interaction in a light cluster, the flee will succeed, and in heavy clutter or pathological layouts, I like the way it called it pathological layouts, as in, it had to be deliberately set up that way. The flee keeps getting re-triggered by danger sensor, and you see repeated triggering flee override already in override logs. And the goal, or rather the global override budget is exhausted, triage reduces constraints, and finally, either the ship escapes with a lower safety margin, or transitions to a stable arrival or end state instead of grinding. That's the spine of what you designed. Flee as a standard steering behavior with a safety radius and local timeout wrapped in behavior manager that monitors global override time and escalates through triage levels to guarantee that avoidance either succeeds with relaxed constraints or gracefully gives up in a controlled, symbolically coherent way. Perfect. Okay. So, thanks for the reminder and detailed summary. Let's go over what we finished in our last session, and then decide what to work on for this session. Okay, so in the last session, you effectively got to a working baseline for the avoidance stack, and then built a stress test cage to probe the worst case behavior without yet wiring the full triage ladder. Projectiles versus sensors were fixed. Plasma bolts were originally colliding with the ship's own danger sensor and hull, being destroyed before reaching the target. So you move the gun muzzle outside the ship's collision shape, tightened collision layers and masks, and added filtering in behavior bolt so that it ignores the shooter and non-shooter. Ignores the shooter and so-called non-targets. The result is that bolts now travel correctly and hit the target area 3D, logging damage events. And then baseline plus override behavior is confirmed. In a simple scene, danger sensor triggers flee reaches safety radius, and prints safe distance reached and NPC behavior manager. Marks flee as completed, restores the interrupted pattern, and the attack pattern runs end to end with clean logs and no stuck states. And then the local flee timeout behavior validated. You configured the maximum flee duration is small, the safety radius is relatively large, and in cluttered or awkward setups, flee times out and logs that behavior is completed, flee with status failed, reason is timeout. And the manager then restores the pattern and the ship continues normally. The boxed in stress test built and exercised, you constructed a 3D grid of mining objects around the ship and stepped down the spacing from 23 to 15 to 5 units. And at a spacing of 5, the danger sensor fires repeatedly from multiple directions while flee is active. The manager logs override requests ignored already in override many times. And after maximum flee duration, the flee fails and the override ends. And as soon as normal seek resumes, the ship exits the box and heads to waypoint 0. That last case is your pathological scenario. Flee cannot solve the local clutter, but normal navigation can once you stop overriding, which is exactly where global triage would eventually adjust behavior. So what is not finished yet? The global override budget and triage ladder exist conceptually, but are not fully implemented in code. So there's no accumulated override time or override distance. There's no logged triage levels 0, 1, 2, and 3. There is no automatic adjustment of safety radius or emergency behavior based on that budget. And the flee's direction logic is still fairly naive. It uses an away from current danger vector, which can produce grazes rather than strong rebounds or step out of the cage moves. And you have not yet added reflection, angle, clamping, or centroid-aware flee as a deliberate design. Collisions with mining objects are not yet connected to the ship damage. So you talked about adding damage on contact to visually confirm whether escapes are clean or scraping through, and that hasn't been wired up yet. So the good options for this session: to keep activation low and momentum high, here are 3 concrete tracks, each with a trivial first step. Wire the global override triage. That's the system's focus. Then there's also a behavior focus, which is to improve the flee direction shaping. And there's a feel or a debug focus, which is to add mining object giving damage to the ship on collision. So those are 3 things we can do. And we have about 40 minutes. Okay? So realistically speaking, if we were to do all 3, we would need less than 15 minutes each, because 45 is 15 times 3, right? And we only have 40, which means 5 over 3, less than 15. If you want to go even more exact, it would probably be 12 and a half minutes. And we can confirm that. 40 over 3 is, okay, 13.3. So let's say 10 minutes each. Okay, 10 minutes each will give us another 10 minutes at the end for whatever else. So if we break our remaining time 40 minutes into 3 segments of 10 minutes, then we have another 10 minutes left at the end to wrap things up. Realistically, the 10 minutes at the end is more a buffer for the main 3 segments. Let's try to address all 3 steps or rather all 3 tracks listed above in this session, so we can maximize our productivity for this session. Good plan. Here is a concrete schedule with trivial to start actions for each 10-minute segment covering all 3 tracks. Alright, so segment 1, 10 minutes, mining object ship damage feedback. The goal, prove visually whether the ship really clears asteroids or scrapes through. Minimal damage hook. On the mining target scene, add this code. And if the mining target is not an area 3D, but a static body 3D, then do the same with the body entered on area or body shape entered on the ship. The principle is the same. And a quick test is to run the box test scene, watch the log for mining collision with enemy ship during flee, whether the collisions occurred during the effortless escape after flee ends, and if you see collisions only during flee, and none during the post-flee seek, that tells you the escape is truly clear and the bad behavior is limited to the boxed-in flee phase. Segment 2, Global Override Triage Skeleton. Add a simple override timer and 1 triage level using your existing box test. 2.1, in NPC Behavior Manager, add a state, which is this, in process delta or your update loop. Then there's this, and the hook, to hook into start or end of overrides. When starting any override, there's this. When ending any override, there's that, and so on and so forth. So we can go through all of this in segment 2, right? And then segment 3, the flee direction shaping rebound. Make flee's movement feel less like a graze and more like a purposeful rebound, especially around avoidance objects. In behavior flee or equivalent, compute the basic flee direction and keep that, but add shaping. Enforce a minimum angle and a current forward. Apply velocity and rerun. The buffer segment, integrate and decide next priorities. Use the remaining time to scan logs for these things, to decide those things, and so on. Okay, now going back up to phase 1, segment 1 I mean, this is quick and easy, and hopefully it will give us additional time in the other 2 segments if we can get it done fast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and put it over to the right. So if you want to pause here, you can, if you want to analyze the code. Otherwise, you can just watch the code as we change it in GDScript. Okay, so I'm going to move this over, go into the editor, the script editor, and on the mining target scene. So mining target scene extends area 3D. Then we've got an export variable for target configuration. We need to add another variable. So export variable, and that's going to be called collision damage. collision underscore damage, and this is of type float, and we assign it a value 5.0. I find it actually quite interesting how this file hasn't been set up to be columnar. Okay, but since we are on a tight budget with time, I'm going to leave it, even though it irks me, and we will do it. I'll correct it after the live stream is done, or maybe in the wrap-up time. We'll see. Okay, so in the ready function, we need to add body entered dot connect. The collision shape mesh instance. On body entered. Area entered, body entered. Okay, so we do have a body entered signal. Perfect. So here we can say body, not body, body entered dot connect, and connect that to on body entered. Okay, and now we obviously have to create the function for on body entered. So down here we create a function, and again we need to separate our functions by 3 lines so that the file is easier to read. So function underscore on body entered, and that takes in a body of type node 3D and returns void. Right, so over here we have to have logic that says if body is in group and what group is that? Enemy ship. Does it have to be enemy ship? Let's see, what are the groups? Enemy ship. But realistically speaking, it shouldn't just be enemy ship. It should be if any body that is not a mining object collides with this mining object, it should deal damage. So let's change this to be if not body is in group mining object. I mean mining vessel. Right? So anything that isn't a mining vessel that collides with this body, then the same logic will still apply, right? So then we print a message saying mining collision with non-mining vessel damage, and then the damage, right? So collision damage. And if the body has a method, has method take damage. Actually, no, this is a take damage, so that's as a string. Then body.take damage. Okay. So let's just go back to the health script quickly. Behavior target. Here we go. There should be a take damage here somewhere. No? Oh, okay. Oh, there it is. The shooter type, the shooter ID, and the damage taken. So yeah, okay, so there we go. I was literally looking at the function and I searched for it elsewhere. Wow, okay. So take damage, the shooter type, collision, shooter ID, none, because nobody shot, and the damage taken is collision damage. Okay, so I'm going to copy all of this and paste it here. Right, so we did this. The quick test is of course to do that. Here is the code for target behavior.gd. And then I'll say, as you can see, I changed the group check to be for any object that isn't a mining vessel. This makes the code more general. So an AI pirate or defender will take damage as well as a player pirate or defender, plus anything else that can move or collide with the mining object. I also adjusted the print statement to be more general than what you suggested. That's a solid, generalized collision damage hook that fits your intent. Anything that can move and isn't explicitly a mining vessel will take collision damage when it hits a mining target. What this script now does, on ready, applies mesh, rotation, collider, health, and grouping from target config, connects body entered on the area 3D to on body entered, and then it hooks the embedded health resource to the 3D health bar. On damage, the take damage subtracts config.damage resistance, logs the hit, updates current health, and updates the health bar, and destroy either frees the host node or emits target destroyed to its parent for custom logic, and then frees itself. And so on and so forth. Minor things to keep an eye on. Make sure any ship that you that should take collision damage is not in the mining vessel group, and implements take damage with the same signature you are calling here. If later you add non-vessel dynamic objects that should not take damage or mining collisions, you can either put them into mining vessel or add a second check-in on body entered. Or add a second check-in on body entered. Ignore specific groups like projectile, for example. From here, the next practical step is to run the box 5 test with the script active and watch how many mining collision logs occur during flee versus during post-flee seek, and whether your so-called effortless escapes are genuinely clean or come at a hull damage cost. If body has method. Yeah, well, I mean, it's already doing this, right? So if it's already not in the group mining vessel, and it has a method take damage, then it takes the damage. And then it said anyone who can effectively take damage, so player controller should have a take damage script somewhere. What? Why is my player not entities? Player. Defender player. Oh, there we go. So here we go. The health script. Gun defender, the player ship in the script. Behavior gun player. Behavior. Player controller. That's this one. On pause state changed, extract your pitch, pure your pitch, toggle pause, input and physics process. Then in the health script, ready, set max, set current, initialize. And then the gun defender. Okay. Okay, so here's the thing. I am not going to worry about that right now. I will check in testing seek behavior whether the pirate takes damage after doing the whole triage avoidance thing, right? So here we go. And if I tell it to find a random waypoint, it seems to have avoided everything. Give it a second. Let it travel to waypoint 6. Perfect. So then we can copy all of this and go back to perplexity and say here. Okay, so here is the output of the last run, or rather of the run, the test run I just did. The health bar didn't decrease. What do the logs say? Did the collision, or rather, were there any registered collisions in the log? Nothing in this log indicates that any collision damage events fired. There are no mining collision or similar lines, and no calls to take damage from mining collisions. What the log does show: the danger sensor triggers repeatedly during flee, patterns complete cleanly, no collision damage messages, and so for this run, danger sensor is overlapping the mining objects areas, which is why you see all the danger triggers. The ship body is not entering the mining objects area 3D for body entered in target behavior.gd. So no mining collision damage is applied and the health bar stays unchanged. If you want to confirm this visually, next, turn on visual collision shapes in the Godot debug menu and watch whether the ship's hull collider actually intersects the mining object's colliders, or only the danger sensor shell does. Okay, so here's the thing. We have 15 minutes, right? And realistically speaking, we aren't going to do all 3 segments anymore, right? Because we've taken too much time doing this phase. So I need to choose one of the other 2. So let me just say, we have less than 15 minutes left, and there are still 2 tracks left from those you recommended. Let's get to work on track 2. I doubt we will have time to do track 3 before the end of the session, unfortunately. Given the time, the most useful thing is to harden Flea's direction logic in one small testable place. How it picks and clamps the flea vector around obstacles. Below is a concrete patch you can drop into behavior_flee.gd or wherever you compute the flee direction. The base flee direction, already close to what you have, near where you log flee behavior activated for ship 0 from danger at. This with flee direction that. Ensure the direction is computed explicitly. This matches the standard behavior, the standard flee behavior, move away from the target point, and then compute the ship's forward and an allowed forward component. Clamp the flee vector so it doesn't graze forward, and apply velocity as before. Okay, so that's the 4 steps we need to go through in order to get this track done, and hopefully we can get it done before I run out of time. And if I don't if I don't get it done before I run out of time, then I'll take this moment right now to promote my DevVenture with MTK ecosystem, right? So as you know, there is a Coffee page, coffee.com/mtkdev, that you can go to and support the channel. You could either be a member, and there are 3 membership tiers: the intern DevVenturer, the junior DevVenturer, and the senior DevVenturer. Each of these have their own perks, and they stack. So the junior stacks on top of the senior, junior stacks on top of the intern, and the senior stacks on top of the junior. So the senior has access to all 3 tiers, right? And at this time, I would like to make a shout out to Cubes. He is our junior DevVenturer. He is the only current junior DevVenturer, and you can join him by going to coffee.com/mtkdev. If you don't want to be a member, if you can't afford to be a member with monthly subscriptions, you could do a once-off donation, and anything that you can donate is very much appreciated. Other than that, you can support the channel by liking, subscribing, and joining the DevVenture with MTK community on Discord. So there's a server that I've created, a community on Discord around DevVenture with MTK and all the content I create for that ecosystem. And if you join that, you will find all the announcements and links and resources that I make available there. Okay, the link to the Discord server is in the description of this video and all previous live streams on this playlist. So I hope to see you in the community very soon. Now let's get back to the content. Okay, we have about 10 minutes left, which is roughly the original budget for this track. So let's try and get that done. Okay, so we'll go into dev mode, right? So we'll move this over to the side, open up the editor, and get to work. And so we need to go into behavior flee, which is over here. Minimum deflection angle, maximum deflection angle. Apply flee motion, compute deflected flee direction. Here we go. The danger position is over here. Ensure the direction is computed explicitly near where you log flee behavior activated for ship 0. Flee behavior activated for ship 0. Here we go. We need to ensure the direction is computed explicitly. Okay, I'm going to give it the code because it seems to have forgotten what the code looks like. Okay, so here is the code for behavior flee.gd. This is before I made any of your suggested changes. Please adjust your advice to fit the context so it becomes easier for me to make the necessary changes. You already have a nice structure, a direct flee vector, that a one-time deflection, then a one-time deflection via compute deflected flee direction. Then you reuse the cache direction. The shaping we talked about just needs to slot in between those two steps. So below is an adjusted version that requires minimal edits to your existing code. Add a forward bias clamping in activate. Rather, right after you compute the direct flee direction, and before you call compute deflected flee direction, add a small helper to reduce overly forward movement. So there's a function here, and then implement clamp forward component, which is another helper. And this keeps the random deflection logic intact, but ensures that the base flee direction is not almost keep going forward with a slight wiggle, which is what causes grazing around obstacles instead of a decisive step away. Okay, so let's get to work on this. Right, so we've got two whole functions to implement, and then step 3 would be leave computed flee direction and process as is, and what to look for in the next run. So that should hopefully be it. Right, after that, then we would have completed the track, and we can conclude the live stream, the session. So going back into this, we can go down to the very bottom, create another 2 helper functions. Right, so here's a function, and we can call that activate. Oh no, there is already an activate function, right? The existing code above, the ship position, the variable to danger, if to danger dot length is greater than 0. Oh, here we go. So there's new. Before flee direction cached. So here in between these two. So we need to do this. We say direct flee direction is assigned the clamp of, oh, there's a function we need to create called clamp forward component, which takes in direct flee direction. Right? And now we need to go to the very bottom and create that function. Clamp forward direction. And that function takes in the flee direction. We could just say flee direction of type vector 3. Returns a vector 3, and over here we could just copy this code to go faster. Okay, so the ship is facing the direction, and in Godot 3D negative basis.z is commonly the forward direction. Yes, that's true. And then this is how much we allow fleeing along forward. So the forward vector is the negative enemy ship.global transform basis z.normalized. Okay, so that's literally just getting the forward pointing direction and assigning that to a variable called forward. Right? And then column 40. And 60. Okay, and then the constant maximum forward dot The dot product is of type float. We'll set that to 0.5. So how much we allow fleeing along the forward direction, right? 0.5 roughly up to 60% from forward. So forward and a 60-degree deflection. And then the dot forward, and then the dot forward. So if dot forward is greater than the maximum forward dot, then the variable projected is assigned this, which is the flee direction minus the forward times the dot forward, and we normalize that. Okay, and then the flee direction at the end here is the projected, which is this value, times 0.7, not sure what that 0.7 has to do with anything, plus the flee direction times 0.3 dot normalized. Then you print out flee direction adjusted to reduce forward bias with flee direction and return flee direction. And then we can save. Clamp forward component. Oh. There you go. Okay, and then step 3 is to leave compute deflected flee direction and process as is, and run the test case. And we are just about ready to end the session after that as well. So coming back here, we can run the code, watch it do its thing. And then tell it to do go towards waypoint 2, and it seems to have avoided all the collision objects. Nice and easy. Okay, so now we can copy all of this and paste it in the bottom here. So here is the output from the last run. Does it look correct to you? Do you notice anything from the logs that is not as it should be? The behavior is consistent with your current flee design, and the boxed in test flee runs, gets spammed by danger sensors, times out cleanly, and the ship then resumes normal navigation and reaches its waypoint. There's nothing obviously wrong or broken in this log. What works, what looks correct, what is missing versus your current goals. There's no bias log, no forward bias log, so there are no flee direction adjusted to reduce forward bias messages, which means either clamp forward component was not yet added or connected, or its condition, dot forward greater than max forward dot, did not trigger for this particular danger configuration. No triage or global override logging. You still only see local flee timeouts. There's no global override limit reached or triage 1 safety radius reduction, which is expected because the override time tracking or triage hook has not been wired up yet. So given the time box for the session, you now have a confirmed, robust, local flee behavior, works, times out correctly, and does not break patterns. A well-behaved boxed in test clearly shows the pathological case where flee cannot resolve the local cluster, but normal navigation can. And the next logical steps are ensuring clamp forward component is definitely active, then tuning the max forward dot constant, and implementing the global override budget and triage level 1 using the box 5 scene to verify that after enough override time, free parameters adapt rather than repeating identical timeouts. Okay, and with that, we've reached exactly an hour, and the live stream is done. All right, so I've already done all the admin, all the promotional things. So please do support the channel, and thank you so much for your time and attention. I'll see you in the next live stream.